Lacy is an entrepreneur, the vice chair of the Mount Pleasant Planning Commission, and a Mount Pleasant resident. Now he's also a candidate for Mount Pleasant Town Council. He tells me why he's running for this particular seat for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Garrett Lacy, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Yes, sir, Quintin. Thank you for having me. Certainly appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, you're very welcome. Needless to say, you're an entrepreneur, the vice chair of the Mount Pleasant Planning Commission, a Mount Pleasant resident, and now a candidate for the Mount Pleasant Town Council. As you know, a special election for that particular special seat that was obviously vacated by now Charleston County Sheriff Carl Ritchie will be held on March 25th. So tell me, Garrett, with all your experience in your life in Mount Pleasant, why Mount Pleasant Town Council? Why now?
Well, I've always been called for public service. My family has been for years, but you can see with my resume, I've been involved in serving the people of the town of Mount Pleasant in an appointed capacity for the past 2.5 years. What spurred the onset for me to run was the Patriots Point annex, which essentially could have potentially proposed the development of SCDNR, held conservation easement, and would have potentially resulted in a 1% sales tax increase throughout the town of Mount Pleasant.
So, as we sit here right now, Garrett, what alternatives would you have if you were on town council right now?
Alternatives in what respect?
As far as I know you wanted to stop that whole easement, and then of course that sales tax issue that would have happened if something were to go about. But what alternatives would you have if you were on town council right now?
Well, I don't believe there's any alternative to a sales tax increase. The public voted for that in November, countywide.
Right.
The answer to that question was shut, in my opinion. And I didn't appreciate the avenue in which it was being conducted or proposed, should I say. And when it comes down to a SCDNR held conservation easement, there's no even potentially play ball. The people from the Department of Natural Resources, it is their job to uphold those easements, whether it's in perpetuity or within a covenant. And I believe that a municipality proposing what would be a potential land trading scenario with any state agency would open up a Pandora's box. I'm glad to see that the council and the mayor realize that this was probably not the most adequate time to push that measure.
How should they go about that measure as far as communicating that to the public? Should it be a town hall meeting?
It is, and I will say to their defense, in the way that the government's run in the town of Mount Pleasant, the first reading is more or less to adopt discussion. So there was a lot of people that they're pushing for transparency. I'm for transparency, but that was not saying that they were going to pass that measure. That was simply procedurally putting it on the agenda for discussion. Yeah, I'll leave it on that one.
No worries, no worries. In your mind, with all your experience and obviously living in Mount Pleasant, what do you believe will be the future of that Patriots Point area as far as development?
Well, there was a parcel that is being debated. I believe it's past first reading by Mr. Bennett. I would love to see that as a vibrant cultural gem in the crown of Mount Pleasant. Something that's got livability, that improves quality of life, some nicer shops, but still protects green space and really shows and enhances the beauty of what essentially is the last gem of a waterfront parcel that we have.
And we're talking about Mr. Mike Bennett, who owns Hotel Bennett, and obviously Rudy John and the music hall right here as well. And he has that hotel right there at the foot of the bridge. Yeah. What else do you want to have in that particular space and still allow for more green space in that area?
Well, right now, I believe the debate is between the uses of the waterfront gateway and development at the moment, and all that's out there. It's in the minutes, as well as the agendas have been published, and it's also in recorded town council moments. With the allowable uses, I certainly wouldn't like to see any residential there, but more of a upscale commercial that essentially codifies the use of green space, height restrictions. I know that they've proposed a grand lawn, which I think is beautiful, but as we enter this, what essentially is the last bit of growth and development for the town on a raw land point of view.
Yes, sir.
We've got to be very smart. One of the platforms I'm running on is smart growth for the redevelopment portion, because I hate to say it, we're built out as a
Yes, sir.
municipality.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
I've heard a couple other people that you've interviewed, and we are built out to Allendale. What we used to think what the upper part of Mount Pleasant is. So
Yes, sir. Where, how much land is actually left in Mount Pleasant? I know that's a redundant question, but where do you see it?
what I see at the moment is probably the largest parcels are going to be still held within the county planning and zoning. There's the
Mm.
tract on 41, which is a contentious issue at the moment. We've got several different county parcels as well as the unincorporated settlement communities around Mount Pleasant. And then you've got, small cookie cutter lots that just have not been zoned and annexed into the town. The town has vested rights up to a certain point to the town of Allendale, and that is codified legally.
Right.
So there's no going past that line at this point.
Yes, sir. So when it comes to obviously development, what should be zoned and what should be obviously rezoned in your mind right now?
Well, currently we're working on rewriting the entire zoning code. I
Oh,
think a lot of good things. We've certainly highlighted some economic development. Recently, we've also the multifamily moratorium's been lifted, so we are going to see quite a few people, I believe, try to bring more multifamily to the town. With that being said, it's not a shutdown game, but we've got to think years and years ahead. Let's take Carolina Park for example. I know I knew we were going to get there, so I figured I'd open the door. Um, that is a very contentious subject right now. And that was approved, we're talking multiple councils ago, several decades ago. And now we're seeing the repercussions of what was very liberal, uh, very liberal allowed uses within that planned development. A car dealership, mini flex warehousing. That's not something people want to see in the town of Mount Pleasant. And
yeah.
if it is certainly, we are well aware that the residents don't want to see that.
And I just saw a Facebook post where someone mentioned that there's a car dealership, I believe, right next to Costco, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure, yes, sir, there is.
Wow, wow. I haven't been over there in a year. So I used to work out there a
Yeah,
lot in the Park West area in Carolina Parks. I know all about that. Where could planned redevelopment happen right now in Mount Pleasant to make
plan re-
sure?
plan redevelopment is going to happen everywhere. We're
Yes,
going to
sir.
see parcels that are going to be outdated.
Right.
Let's Will back to town center, for example.
Mm.
That there are businesses in there that are going to need to be looked at, and they're going to want to do different things. They came in front of council and in front of commission with a very, very broad. They were asking for the moon and the stars. That was not something that was granted to them, but we are going to see tracts like that, and even smaller 1 acre lots. Our 1AB rezoning, which we've got on the agenda for tomorrow.
Right.
It's going to be smaller pieces, but it's going to happen across the entire town of Mount Pleasant.
Mm.
Safely say that we do not have any larger tracks that would become something like a midtown,
Right.
a neighborhood, things like that. So it's going to be on a smaller scale, but I believe it's going to be a bit more numerous in request.
And so, if a developer comes to you all right now, what exactly do you want from them as far as that?
I mean, what you would want from a developer, number one, is the guarantee of green space. The current mayor and council have done a great job in pushing sustainability, resiliency, and incorporating what essentially is the tree protection element of the zoning code. I love that. I think that's going to be a big thing we see. Another part is we're going to want connectivity, infrastructure.
Yes, sir.
Right, and there's a lot of, again, I'll echo that the mayor and the council, they've done a lot of good things. We've got Mount Pleasant Way, which is now under construction, Ed Von Key. We've got good improvements that are, yes, they're behind. Everybody knows they're behind because of traffic and whatnot, but we are now moving proactively forward. We need that stuff from developers. We also need better communication throughout different venues, whether it be CCSD, CARTA, the Council of Governments. We cannot, moving forward, maintain an ostrich with his head in the sand position when it comes to these things. We're going to have to work with public and private sector to be sure that everything is allocated properly in the future building development and redevelopment of Mount Pleasant.
Oh man, you brought up something very interesting. Okay, so what public-private partnership would you be in favor for when it comes to connectivity in the town of Mount Pleasant?
Well, I mean, I think that would generally be spurred by the developer itself
Mm,
in working with the town, with
sure.
purely with economic development, we can look at impact fees, things like that. Streamlining the application and zoning process, or should I say, building permit process. Those are going to be something we have to look at, and that's where I'd start. But I would venture to say that the private sector will probably initiate those conversations.
Are they having any conversations like this right now?
Let's see. Yes, right now on the planning commission agenda for tomorrow night, we've got a tract off of Venning Road.
Oh, yes.
Yep, that's a contingency there. We've got another rezoning, which is in the Tupelo area, which is the northern part of Mount Pleasant, up there on the left-hand side. So that's what we've got in the pipeline right now. Other than it's passed through commission, council does have what would be Mr. Bennett's project at Patriots Point in front of them.
Mhm. And going back earlier, Garrett, you mentioned obviously multifamily, homes and whatnot. Where ideally can you put that in Mount Pleasant with all of this growth and limited space?
That's going to be very interesting. If you're going to see, I don't know of anything to answer your question directly. I don't know of anything right now that's coming down the pipe. I think again it's going to be a case to case basis.
Sure.
But we're going to see a lot of these older lots and a lot of these older, shopping centers and properties that they're not very feasible anymore. They don't have any tenants in them. I think that's where we're going to start to see those requests come through with this multifamily moratorium being lifted.
I don't want to go ahead of myself because I know most of them and I don't want to call them out, but where do you see that happening down in the future?
I mean, again, to echo it, it's going to be town-wide. Wilson Track's already approached us. There may be one or two off of Coleman still that have indicated that. On the northern end, I am not aware of anything other than the Republic Tract at the moment.
Wow. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sorry about the delay in the audio there, but yeah. So, how many of these particular properties that are potentially outdated do you see actually being redeveloped into that type of housing?
Over the next decade or so, I would believe that we would have anywhere from a half dozen to a dozen requests of merit. Again, I can't speak to a specific.
Sure.
You're just thinking longevity. We're looking for a half dozen to a dozen, I'd imagine.
Yes, sir. Well, let me ask you this, Garrett. What exactly is it that right now that the town needs? Is it affordable housing? Is it attainable housing? Or is it actually workforce housing?
Well, essentially, all of that is exactly the same with different terminology. And I'm very happy to be a part of the commission that recommended to council the phase on road affordable attainable housing. In the truth of the agreement, we're at odds right now because you've got property rights and property value against affordable and attainable housing. We do need affordable and attainable housing. That is without question, but we are going to have to work very closely with the developers, with the legislature to push that through, because at the same time, I don't want to see anybody's property value go down. In saying that, this affordable and attainable housing is not low class, low income. You have to qualify through the county median income in order to obtain or be looked at in this process, which I think a lot of people automatically throw a negative connotation, or the opposition to affordable attainable workforce housing will automatically throw a negative connotation towards it.
I mean, and I'm being redundant with this, Garrett, but where do you see attainable housing in Mount Pleasant?
Right now, I don't. I know. Right now, I don't foresee any tracks in the purview or my understanding that are going to be discussed at this point in time. I understand the reason of what happened on Phase On Road was because of a significant contribution from City Coast Church.
Right.
So when we're talking affordable, attainable workforce housing, the developer has also got to come to the table with it.
Sure.
Echo property values, like I said, that's where the rubber meets the road. We're starting to grind gears.
Wow. Well, let me ask you. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, let me ask you. Oh, go ahead. Yes, sir.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, no, you're fine. It's just a little delay in the audio there, but where can you actually rehab, expand, and better utilize those existing homes in Mount Pleasant?
I mean, with Quentin, to answer your question, it's at this point we can't. I can't give a location because that would be with it being the redevelopment phase, as I spoke earlier. This
Right.
would be project case to case basis. I
Mm.
can provide opinions and
Sure,
inferences.
sure.
I think at this point in time, like I said, you're going to see these smaller pockets throughout the town. Hey, this shopping center's dead. We need something going here. How can we work with everything?
Mm. As we sit here right now, what is the typical property value for most of these homes and properties in Mount Pleasant?
Well, I would say, and understand I'm not a real estate agent. I don't have this number readily available, but it's definitely north of 500,000. The county is also reassessing all properties throughout Charleston County, which is going to be a very eye-opening tax bill to a lot of people. But that's also going to allow Mount Pleasant, in my opinion, to approach a very interesting time. We're going to have ideally more revenue generation than we have right now. People are discussing burying power lines, saving trees.
Sure.
Mount Pleasant is going to have the ability to essentially create some new funds to squirrel away some money while not raising property taxes after this reassessment. But that's also going to go to aid with economic development. I mean,
Right.
that's saying we don't have to go up on development fees to foot the bill for this,
Mm.
or instead of the franchise fees that we're getting, we can take we can take 1% of five, and we can put it over here in this fund to be used for this. Let's take trees for example. We take 1% of that franchise fee that we get of any franchise fee, 5%. We take 1%. We save enough money. We're able to go to the county and to the state just the same way as they widen 17, cut it in thirds, and we have good collaboration that's going to lead to better infrastructure and a better overall quality of life for everyone there.
Why are these municipalities not communicating effectively with these local governments?
That's a great question. I that for the longest period of time, the mayor does a very good job of communicating with other entities. I don't necessarily foresee that with the rest of council at this point in time, but staff also does a phenomenal job. And
Sure.
staff takes up, they take that as their initiative, and that is
Mm.
their job. But at the same time, as elected official, it is, I believe, it is your duty and right to be looking vigilantly of how we can work and collaborate with other people in the future.
And speaking of the future, Garrett, where exactly in Mount Pleasant in the town where you all can actually bury some of these power lines in the meantime?
I understand they did a study in the Groves a couple years ago, and that fee was astronomical. It was, I can't quote it off the top of my head, but it was to the point where this was a cut and cut and dry case here. I would say it would have to start probably somewhere like the Groves or Old Village and continue to move through where we've got a lot of the older, grander trees.
Oh yeah.
I would leave that up to staff's interpretation of where to start it. I do know that the incurred cost on the homeowner itself was going to be from the buried line to the house. We were also going to have, I believe, one big green power box every 4 to 6 houses, which is going to go in somebody's front yard, which aesthetically they're not going to want to do.
Right.
So a lot of different things we're going to have to look at when it comes to that. But to echo what I said previously, with this new situation we've got coming up, we have the ability to start to squirrel away some money. We have the ability to help promote economic development and not raise taxes on the residents in the town of Mount Pleasant.
What exactly should be that 5-year economic development plan for the town of Mount Pleasant?
Well, right now the town does have a very good economic development plan. It's with incentives. Of course, they want to touch on impact fees.
Right.
It's incentives to small businesses. It's with streamlining the process of permitting, as I mentioned earlier. And, essentially it's going to be making the development process easier and more affordable on the developers, which is going to allow these small business owners in particular to get to work.
For these small businesses, will the town of Mount Pleasant actually create some sort of business alliance with these people to keep?
Yes, the town actually works very closely with the Mount Pleasant Chamber of Commerce, and they've been around for a couple years now. I want to say that some of their founding members are small business owners, and they do a great job. So does the Charleston Metro Business Chamber of Commerce. It's nice to see Mount Pleasant have its own niche,
Hmm.
people to get behind to help further push these initiatives.
When it comes to these initiatives with economic development, what is one that you really want to work on if you were to get on town council?
The streamlining of the
Mhm.
process. If anything, being on planning commission, that's what I hear all the time is, we've been sitting, we've been waiting, what's going on? Well, I'm an appointed commissioner. I'm not a staff member. I would like to think that council would be able to push staff a little bit more to get this stuff done. There's one business right now on Shim Creek that is currently awaiting town staff reports and building permit process, and they have been for quite some time, and they're a bit frustrated, rightfully so. They want to get the business, they want to be able to build and provide what they can.
What can and I love Shims Creek immensely, and I'll be over there for the bridge run in April. But what will the Shim Creek area continue to provide for the town of Mount Pleasant in the next 5 to 10 years? How do you preserve that area?
I believe the number one part of preserving that is going to be starting with environmental preservation. Um, if anything, if I could wave a magic wand, I would love to redo the plumbing.
Mhm.
Love to redo what goes into our waterways. And I think that's a large part of the initiative that has been created with the Green Commission, with the
Okay.
sustain and resiliency push that the town is doing. And we've realized that we are the crown jewel of municipalities in South Carolina, and we want to further protect that.
Garrett Lacy, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close Ups.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it, Quentin.
You're welcome.